I never thought I'd be the kind of guy posting about this, but here we are. I've been married for 8 years, together for 10, and for the most part, life felt stable. You know, the kind of stability that's comfortable, almost boring. But about 6 months ago, I started noticing small things. My wife, let's call her Emily, suddenly got secretive with her phone. Little excuses here and there. Oh, it's just work stuff, or I don't want to bother you with this. At first, I shrugged it off. I mean, who doesn't want a little privacy, right? But then came the pattern. Late nights at work, sudden trips that didn't make sense, and a growing distance that wasn't just emotional. It felt physical, like she was slowly retreating from me. I started checking my own feelings, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just stress, maybe it was me being paranoid. But deep down I knew. There was something off, and my gut wasn't lying. That night, the night I realized something was really wrong, I sat on our couch, staring at her laughing at a TV show I didn't even care about. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a cold, sinking dread, like the ground beneath me had just cracked open. So, a few days later, I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. I confronted her, not in a screaming, dramatic way, but quietly, carefully. I asked her if something was going on. Her reaction was telling. She froze, avoided my eyes, fiddled with her ring, and muttered something about stress and work. My heart sank. That was the moment the truth started clawing its way into my chest. I tried to stay calm, tried to convince myself that maybe it wasn't what I feared. But that nagging feeling wouldn't leave. I started noticing every little thing. The way her phone vibrated and she'd quickly hide it, the smell of perfume that wasn't mine, the subtle defensiveness when I asked simple questions. Every observation punched me in the gut like a series of small but undeniable hits. I didn't want to believe it, but a part of me already knew. I felt betrayed, dumbfounded, and angry, all at once. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone I trusted with my entire life could quietly slip away from me without me noticing until it was almost too late. After that night, I couldn't focus on anything. Work emails blurred together, meals felt like chores, and even walking the dog became a strange, hollow ritual. Every little thing reminded me of her, or, more accurately, reminded me of how I thought our life was versus what was actually happening. Anger became my constant companion. I'd replay moments in my head, trying to pinpoint when the first signs of this betrayal appeared. Was it the week she said she had extra hours at work? Or the sudden insistence on gym classes she never mentioned before? Every memory twisted into a question, every question into a spiral. I caught myself imagining confrontations that would never happen. I imagined yelling, storming out, maybe even leaving everything behind. But beneath all that rage was a quieter, heavier feeling, heartbreak. I realized I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself, for missing the signs, for trusting so blindly, for believing that we were invincible. After the initial surge of anger faded, it was replaced by this quiet, heavy sadness. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was the kind that seeps into your bones and makes even the simplest tasks feel exhausting. I started noticing the little things I used to take for granted. Her laugh, the way she made coffee just the way I liked it, even her annoying habit of leaving socks on the floor. All of it now felt like a punch to the gut. I'd sit alone in the living room, staring at her side of the bed, and wonder if the version of our life I had imagined was ever real. Nights were the worst. Silence amplifies everything. The betrayal, the confusion, the pain. I cried more than I ever thought I would. And every time I thought about confronting her again, I realized I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I'd survive the truth if it came out in full. Some nights, I just wanted to disappear. Not leave her, not leave life, just vanish from the constant ache in my chest. It's strange, the loneliness you can feel even when someone you love is still right there, physically in the room. The anger that had been boiling inside me for weeks suddenly collided with this crushing sadness. I realized I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt invisible. The person I thought I knew, the person I built my life with, had been living a separate life right under my nose. And for what? A thrill? A distraction? A mistake? I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. Not really. I walked out of the room, sat on the porch, and just let the cold night hit me. My body shook. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was feel the weight of it. Every ounce of trust and love I'd poured into her, now fractured, scattered. After that confrontation, nights became unbearable. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over. Every conversation, every laugh, every touch now felt tainted, like I had been living in a carefully constructed illusion. I questioned everything, my judgment, my worth, even the way I loved her. I started noticing little things in myself that I'd ignored before. Was I too busy with work? Did I stop being attentive? Had I stopped noticing her? The self-doubt was like a shadow, creeping into every corner of my life. I felt fragile, exposed, and somehow complicit in my own heartbreak. Friends tried to reach out. I couldn't explain it without tearing up, and I didn't want to be the guy who moaned about a cheating spouse. It felt too raw, too shameful. So I stayed quiet, trapped in this private storm that no one else could see. Even my routines started slipping. Coffee tasted bitter, the gym felt pointless, and I found myself wandering the city streets at night, just to escape the four walls that now reminded me of betrayal. After weeks of spiraling, I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this, sleep-deprived, anxious, haunted by images that refused to leave my mind. I needed to invest in myself, not just to survive, but to start feeling like a person again. I started small. Morning runs, just me and the empty streets. At first, every step felt heavy, like I was running through molasses. But gradually, my lungs remembered how to breathe deeply, my legs remembered strength, and my mind started to clear, even if just a little. I picked up a book I'd been meaning to read for months, something challenging in English to push myself. The words became a kind of therapy. I got lost in grammar, vocabulary, and the flow of sentences. Every chapter one finished felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been buried under betrayal. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't linear. Some days, I'd fall back into despair. But those little victories, running another mile, finishing a chapter, reminded me that I still existed outside of her lies. After a month of small, deliberate steps, I started noticing changes. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to feel alive. The mirror no longer reflected a broken, defeated man. I saw someone who could stand on his own, who could reclaim space that had been stolen by betrayal. I began setting boundaries at work, saying no, without guilt, and even reconnected with friends I'd neglected. It felt strange at first, like rediscovering muscles I hadn't used in years, but each interaction reinforced that my life didn't have to revolve around someone else's choices. The hardest part, though, was confronting the idea of forgiveness, not for her, but for myself. Forgiving myself for not noticing sooner, for trusting blindly, for letting my happiness depend entirely on her. I didn't need to excuse her actions, but I needed to stop punishing myself. This period became less about her and more about me, my passions, my skills, my sense of worth. And slowly, I realized that investing in myself wasn't just therapy. It was survival, it was power, and it was the only way forward. After months of reflection, I knew I had to make a choice. Staying in the marriage meant constant reminders of betrayal, slow erosion of my self-worth, and endless questions with no real answers. Leaving was terrifying, financially, emotionally, socially, but I realized some things can't be repaired with patience or therapy. Some cracks are too deep. I sat down with Emily one evening. No yelling, no dramatics, just a clear, honest conversation. I told her I couldn't continue like this. She cried, pleaded, offered apologies, promises, explanations, but the truth was, it wasn't enough. Not anymore. My heart had been broken, and I had to protect myself first. Walking out of that house for the last time was surreal. Part of me wanted to turn back, but another part felt liberated. For the first time in months, I could breathe without that heavy weight pressing on my chest. It was scary, but it was also the first real moment of clarity and control I'd had since discovering the betrayal. The first weeks after leaving were a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The house felt too quiet, the bed too big, and every corner reminded me of what had been lost. I had to consciously rebuild routines that made me feel alive again. I threw myself into work, but differently this time. Not as a way to escape, but as a way to invest in my growth. I started taking online courses, improving skills I'd ignored, and even practicing my English by writing and reading more deliberately. Every small accomplishment, every new word learned, felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried under heartbreak. Friends became a lifeline. I started saying yes to invitations I would have declined before. Coffee with a friend, a weekend hike, even awkward dinners. These moments reminded me that life could still be enjoyable without her presence. And slowly, day by day, I began feeling something I hadn't in months, a sense of possibility. It wasn't happiness yet, not fully, but it was a seed. And for the first time, I realized that investing in myself wasn't just about distraction. It was about growth, resilience, and taking ownership of my own life. The first weeks after leaving were a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The house felt too quiet, the bed too big, and every corner reminded me of what had been lost. I had to consciously rebuild routines that made me feel alive again. I threw myself into work, but differently this time. Not as a way to escape, but as a way to invest in my growth. I started taking online courses, improving skills I'd ignored, and even practicing my English by writing and reading more deliberately. Every small accomplishment, every new word learned, felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried under heartbreak. Friends became a lifeline. I started saying yes to invitations I would have declined before. Coffee with a friend, a weekend hike, even awkward dinners. These moments reminded me that life could still be enjoyable without her presence. And slowly, day by day, I began feeling something I hadn't in months, a sense of possibility. It wasn't happiness yet, not fully, but it was a seed. And for the first time, I realized that investing in myself wasn't just about distraction. It was about growth, resilience, and taking ownership of my own life. Focusing on myself brought unexpected surprises. I reconnected with old friends who reminded me who I was before the marriage defined me. I discovered hobbies I had abandoned, photography, writing, even cooking elaborate meals just to see if I could. Each little victory was a reminder that life could be rich, even without the person I thought I'd spend forever with. The real surprise, though, was how much lighter I felt emotionally. Nights that once felt unbearable now passed with a sense of quiet accomplishment. I laughed more, joked more, and even started imagining a future that wasn't anchored in betrayal. One day, I received an email from a colleague praising an article I'd written. Another friend called me, asking for advice on a project. These small affirmations felt huge. I realized that the energy I had spent worrying about her choices could now fuel my own growth. It was empowering, and honestly, a little addictive. I started thinking differently about love, trust, and commitment. Not cynically, but more carefully, with a focus on self-respect. For the first time in a long time, I understood that investing in myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. Months in, something shifted. The anger had softened, the sadness dulled, and what remained was acceptance. I accepted that the marriage was over, that the betrayal had happened, and that I couldn't change the past. But more importantly, I accepted myself, flawed, hurt, but resilient. I could think of Emily without a knot forming in my chest. Memories no longer stabbed. They existed as reminders of lessons learned. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about me letting go of the poison of resentment. This acceptance brought clarity. Career growth, language mastery, travel, even exploring new relationships, but cautiously, thoughtfully. I wasn't rushing. I was rebuilding a foundation that wouldn't crumble under someone else's choices. For the first time in a long time, I felt grounded. I had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and self-doubt, and come out stronger. That feeling? It's indescribable. Like breathing fresh air after months underwater. With acceptance came action. I enrolled in courses to improve my skills and my English, dedicating time each day to reading, writing, and learning. I traveled alone, exploring cities I had only dreamed of, taking photos, journaling, documenting the life I was creating for myself. I also focused on my health, not just physically, but mentally. Therapy became a weekly habit, meditation a daily one. I learned to recognize toxic patterns, to set boundaries, and to value my own happiness above all else. The surprises didn't stop. Friends noticed a change in me, more confident, calmer, and more present. Opportunities at work came that I never would have considered before. Even dating felt different, slower, more intentional, with the focus on compatibility rather than desperation. Investing in myself wasn't just about recovering from betrayal. It was about creating a life I didn't need anyone else to validate. Every decision, every step forward, reminded me that I was capable of happiness, resilience, and growth, no matter what had happened. Looking back, I can say one thing with certainty. Betrayal is devastating, but it can also be a catalyst for transformation. Losing someone I loved and thought I could trust forced me to confront myself in ways I never would have otherwise. I learned that my value isn't defined by anyone else's choices, and that investing in yourself is the most powerful response to heartbreak. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone going through something similar, it's this: focus on yourself first. Learn, grow, explore, and reclaim your sense of self. Anger, sadness, and grief are natural, but don't let them define you. The energy you put into rebuilding your life is more valuable than any apology, excuse, or promise from someone who broke your trust. Today, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. I read more, I write more, I laugh more. I've realized that life doesn't end with betrayal. Sometimes, it begins in ways you never expected. And the best part? This life, this version of me, is fully my own.